Thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to join us. Got a pretty exciting presentation, panel discussion this evening on hiring associates and becoming a dental CEO. Got some pretty powerful panelists here for you, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes. I think we'll just run it. If you have questions as we go through, just put them in the Q&A, and we'll work them in during the discussion. If we miss any, we'll get them at the end. But first, I'm going to start by introducing, Mark Murphy. Mark is the CEO of Northeast Private Client Group. He's an author. He's a critical thinker, key business strategist. He's been in the financial services industry for 35 years. He's a Forbes America's top financial security professional, top 20 in 2021. He hosts the Hero of the Hour podcast. He's authored 3 books. Extraordinary Wealth, which is the guide to financial freedom and amazing life. He also has the Win-Win Outcome, which is the deal maker's guide to buying and selling dental practices. And his most recent book is The Ultimate Investment, which is a roadmap to grow your business and build, multi-generational wealth. It's an Amazon bestseller. It has a 4.9 star review, and he unveils the key attributes of entrepreneurship and creating a winning culture, how leadership and emotional fitness play key roles in success, and how to avoid the pitfall of feeding your lifestyle before your investment portfolio. Before the end of the evening, I'll throw the link into the chat down there on how you can get that book of his. And then we also have Trent Hughes. Trent is from Arthur Marshall. He's the director of business development. Arthur Marshall is, committed to helping dental practices and job seekers find their ideal match. Trent has over 20 years of experience in sales and recruitment, forming relationship with dentists, business owners, medical professionals, community health centers, executives, and even professional athletes. And then our third panelist is Todd King. Todd King's also kind of my coach and my mentor. He's an entrepreneur, fortune management franchisee. He's a real estate investor. He's not only a franchise owner, and managing partner with Fortune, but he's also very active as an executive coach, practice management advisor, and key business strategist. Through his 14 years of coaching business experience, he has built several companies of his own. And then as a trainer and coach, he's spoken at events for top entrepreneurs and business leaders in the world. And he now coaches dental professionals from Cleveland to Pittsburgh to Charleston, West Virginia. So welcome to our panelists and welcome to y'all. So I think with that, we'll get started with some questions. We have some questions that we've come up with that we think would be interesting for you. But like I said, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A, and then we'll do our best to answer them. So, Mark, this first one, I'm going to throw this one at you to kick off the conversation. I think the biggest thing is, why should people be paying attention to this tonight? Why should I hire an associate or associates and become a CEO?
I think that, first of all, I would say to you that you're not growing a business, you're growing people. So when you have a topic about hiring other employees, ultimately everything is around a development and a growth plan of your organization. In our group, we don't call it a management team, we call it a leadership team, because you manage people, you manage tasks, you lead people. And, as I've said, probably for 30 some odd years, money markets, CDs, IRAs, 401ks, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, blah, blah, blah. Most of our clients have some or all those assets. Most of our clients will have some or all those assets all their life, but they're inflation-adjusted holding tanks at best. The way to create wealth is 3 ways, Kevin. The first way is investing in your business or some other operating company. The second way is income-producing real estate. The third is financing deals. I'll leave out divorce and inheritance. And so ultimately, for most people on this call that own a dental practice, is if they only have $1 to invest, we want them to invest that in their money machine. And so one of the great things about this topic tonight is the thing that I hear more than anything. You hear a lot of problems. You hear all kinds of successes all day, but you also hear people's problems all day. And the number one problem people have is they can't find great people to work in their organization. And so if you can help solve that problem so you can have the right people to grow with, that's the beginning of a successful business.
Highlight that. I think one of the key things that, Mark, that you mentioned is you're not in the business of growing a business, but you're growing people. And I think that's a huge, huge statement when it comes to owning a business or owning your practices. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing is you're growing people. And if you take that that theme and that moniker, you only have the sky is the limit for growth.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for people that are, looking at this and attending this and thinking about expanding their business is, hiring an associate is getting you, especially if we start talking about partnerships and stuff. I'm sure it's going to come up today in our webinar here, but that's a built-in buyer. Bringing through an associate, it's getting harder and harder to sell practices. I'm seeing practices close every single day. We just structured a merger just last week that closed. And the doctor basically wasn't getting anything. They're getting in a small town, but they're getting $50 a chart for a patient that comes in. They could not sell the practice. It was listed with a broker for almost 2.5, 3 years. So I think that it's really important for us to look at options of hiring associate, at least bringing on people because that gives you that built-in buyer. And like Mark was talking about, it's your business. This is one way to create your wealth.
The way we've tried to describe our business, or what the question that's been asked to me probably 10,000 times is, how do I grow my income? How do I grow my business? How do I grow my freedom of time? How do I grow my freedom of relationships? How do I grow my freedom of purpose? It's wrapped around one of those 5 things. And I've always thought, Todd, you're one person. Kevin, you're one person. Trent, you're one person. Everyone on this Zoom is one person. And so if I'm one person, that's a daunting thing. And so we've always thought that wasn't the right question. The right question should be, who do I need to collaborate with to grow my income, to grow my business, to grow my freedom of time, grow my freedom of relationships, grow my freedom of purpose? And so it's always who, not how. And so I think one of the great things that a business owner needs to do is they need to create great who's in their life, because great who's free up time and free up entrepreneurial synergy for them to continue to not only to create in both excellence and elegance and to be in creation fascination mode all the time.
When you talk about adding associates and becoming the CEO, can we just kind of dive into that a little bit about what that actually looks like? Todd, you mentioned like an associate being like your built-in buyer for your practice, but there's also this trend out there for people like they don't ever want to sell their practice.
Yeah,
they want to maintain it, but they just don't want to work in it anymore.
Well, there's that. And then actually, I don't know if you guys realize this, Trent and Mark, the reason that all 3 of us, one of the reasons we all met together was we had a doctor that waited too long to try to find an associate. He had some health problems up in Ohio. That's the thing too. You've got to be proactive with this and really start planning out and making sure you have that right plan set up. But I just thought that was pretty interesting, that scenario that we all know too well. But luckily, you guys were able to get an associate in there and help that situation out. So
if you were going to put like a definition on CEO of a dental practice, Mark, what would you say?
Well, first, we've spent probably the last 30 years trying to teach doctors to go from being the great artist to the great CEO. And I've actually, so I've spent 30 years teaching doctors that. And now I'm actually trying to flip the script again. And I'm saying, if you're an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs aren't CEOs, they hire CEOs. But it's ultimately, it's about getting paid for what you know, not what you do. And I think the definition to me of an entrepreneurial doctor, because, most people who own a business, not just doctors, but most people who own a business in general think they're entrepreneurs, but they've really just bought themselves a job. And I think it starts with the following thing. I think that if I was going to say one thing, Kevin, I would suggest it to most entrepreneurs. It's not that these people are lazy or not working hard. They're all working very, very hard. They're probably all at 120 or 130% capacity. So I think that one of the things you have to start with is you have to break up with busy. The essence of being an entrepreneur is you've got to let go of something good to create room for something that's great. And I think that's sometimes very hard because it's easy to get rid of stuff that you're terrible at. It's easy to get stuff that you're horrible at, the crappy stuff. But I think the hard part of the entrepreneurial world is getting rid of stuff you're very good or competent in. But if you don't do that, it doesn't free up that space to create real abundance.
And I guess that can be like really challenging in the dental space when you're the dentist and you have the procedures that you're really, really good at and that are really, really productive and you want to hang on to, but you got to start like releasing those to an associate at some point. Is that kind of what you're talking about with like?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say, absolutely. And I think that ultimately that the doctor owner, let's go with the owner operator doctor, has to almost separate himself or herself from their job. Meaning, ultimately, if you've read any of the books we've written, is we've always want our doctors to get paid 4 ways. We want them to get paid as the doctor. We want them to get paid as the landlord if possible. But we also want them to get paid as the CEO and the owner of the business. And we have an expression that after you get paid as the landlord and the doctor, if you're not putting at least 20% to the bottom line, and our best doctors are doing 35, 40, 45%, even a few at 50, you don't really have a business. You bought yourself a job. And so to me, if you want to be the great artist because you love the dentistry and you love your patients and this is where you get your creativity from, that's totally separate than your job as a CEO. And they're almost mutually exclusive. But the only thing you're limited by is there's only 24 hours in the day, and you only want to work so many hours and so many days a week. So you've got to make room for both if you want to do both.
All right, so that's a little bit about kind of like the why. So let's get into the how a little bit. So Trent, I'm going to punt this one over to you to start it off. So what are the key steps involved in the hiring process for an associate dentist?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question and a great kickoff. And I would start with, knowing where you want to take your practice. So knowing where you want to grow with your practice, and that's having a short-term, mid-term, and long-term vision of where you want that practice to go. Are you looking to bring somebody in to eventually take over, be a partner? So having a clear and decisive plan for the future of your practice would be the first start. And then once you identify that, you got to make sure your team is on board and kind of identify what type of candidate and what kind of dentist you want to bring on. Do you want to bring on a new grad? Do you want to bring on somebody with experience? Do you have enough business to maintain a new associate? So those would be the first few steps, is to identify a long-term goal for where you want your practice, be able to identify that, and then identify what type of candidate will be the best fit for your practice.
Trent, one of the things I would say about your firm is, and we've used Arthur Marshall for years, you and your team. And I'll tell you that there's a huge difference between going to job boards or just going out there and going to schools and just trying to find folks. I think with the war for talent that's on right now, you ultimately need, if you're going to find the best people, you're going to have to recruit them, because they're oftentimes working for somebody else right now, or they're in demand and they have 37 offers. And so I think if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm sitting and I'm listening to this Zoom, I'm thinking the following things. There are 4 dental offices lined up, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Why are the best patients and the best staff going to choose to work for me or come to my practice rather than the other 3? And so ultimately it starts with, you're going to have to go out and recruit that talent, because it's not about filling the job. One of my pet peeves or pet sayings is, I never want to solve one problem. I want to solve 3 or 4 at the same time. And so just filling that role, if you don't fill that role, if you can fill that role, it with the right person, that lifts your entire organization and allows all the other people in the organization not to have to overfunction in that role, which makes that's the second way the organization gets stronger. And then when you build great culture in there, ultimately it's then your staff that becomes the third thing. They become the people that are recruiting to you, because they say, hey, I want my family members, I want the people that I care and love about to work in this practice because it's great. And then ultimately the highest level or the highest acknowledgement of growing that business or growing people is when people are hunting you down. You're no longer the hunter, you're the hunted. Where people kind of stalk you out and say, this is such a great place to work. These people have such high integrity. This is an opportunity for me to become very successful and wealthy because this is a great place. And I'm searching them out because I want a job at this office. So I think that you can solve 3 or 4 problems, but all starts with proper team selection.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying that the culture becomes your recruiting.
Mm.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, you want people to grab their people they care about by the wrist and drag them to your practice. Remember that it's tough out there. There's not enough good people out there to solve everybody's needs. There's just not enough people in general, not enough good people. There's a war for talent.
Yeah.
And ultimately you need to, there's dozens of things you need to do. I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of them today. But I mean, Todd, I'm sure for you as an executive coach, I mean, every doctor and practice you talk to is one dentist short, is one hygienist short, is one front desk person short. What are you telling them?
Absolutely. So it's exactly what you're saying. We've got to work on building that culture. We've changed a lot of, when I'm talking with my clients, the advertising and just how they're advertising, like say even for a hygienist. I know we're talking about associates right now. Put your values first. Make it more of an open-ended conversation instead of, hey, just apply my resume, just throw everything out on everything about the job and everything that you need them to do, everything in their job, and make it more of a conversation. Make it more about your values. I think that's going to help you get better talent as well. And that's really kind of what we've been focusing on in general, because it's not just, dentistry, it's every business right now. We're struggling. So I think that would be a main thing for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to the next question. And then you get to kick this one also, Trent, is what are the advantages of using a recruiting agency over advertising and hiring on your own? Like using, like say Indeed or,
Yeah, and one of the first questions that I ask is, are you recruiting or are you hiring? And the difference is hiring, are you just filling a chair? Are you just having somebody to come in and do tasks? Or are you really recruiting to build and grow your people? And so, one of the advantages of working with a group like Arthur Marshall is, our recruiters are going to spend a lot of time on the front end and go find that candidate that fits what you're looking for. So, relying just on the job board, you're to get that active candidate who was interviewing at a number of different jobs. Like Mark mentioned, it is a war on talent right now. And so, you got a guy who's interviewing at 5 or 6 different places, he's looking to get hired. But if you're looking at recruiting and you're going after somebody that's got some experience and got some tangible assets to bring to the table to help grow your people, then you got to go to the recruiting side. And you got to ask those questions and really delve deep on what that candidate is looking for.
I'm going to just plug Arthur Marshall here just for a second, because one of our clients in down in West Virginia just signed up for you guys. And the first thing that you guys did as an organization was the recruiter flew from Texas to that office in West Virginia, spent 2 days there, I believe, one of our clients' offices, and said, I'm not going to start recruiting for you until I know every single thing about this office and what the values are and what the culture is in that practice. I thought that was, that's above and beyond. I don't think most people's going to do that, so they can really talk about what this practice offers.
Yeah, again, it goes to, are you just hiring or you want to recruit? And so having our recruiters go out and really dig deep, what are you looking for? What's going to be a fit in your office? And being able to have that robust conversation with these candidates to really find the guy or girl who's going to be that perfect fit. We're not just hiring a pole, somebody that can get in the mouths and do work. We want somebody that's going to have a true impact, not just on the practice and the growth, but actually the community as well. We want somebody that wants to be part of the community. And the only way to do that is to really dig deep and find out what you as a dentist, owners, CEO are looking for to grow your practice.
I think it also kind of comes down to your time available. If you're as a doctor, if you're still practicing clinically all the time, how are you actually going to be doing the recruiting? Hire an associate is a full-time job. Hire an associate takes a lot of work. I have one client that he, luckily has multiple practices, and he's able to spend some time one or 2 days a week and able to do some of the interviews and stuff. But the average single doctor doesn't have the time to do those interviews. You still got to make time for your family. You still got to have that work-life balance, right? And recruiting, as you know this, it really is a full-time job.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, just those initial phone calls because of that candidate pool. I mean, you got to talk to them about what their motivation is. Why are you looking to make a change? And if they're relocating their family across the U.S., you got to want to know that they're bought in, and then having that conversation with the spouse. So you're talking about right off the bat, having an hour to 2 hour conversation with a potential candidate. Try to practice, try to manage your practice and be that CEO. It's a lot of time commitment. And so taking that off your plate to allow you to be that CEO of your practice allows us to step in and really do that job for you.
Especially you got a situation, you got some offices, kind of like Mark alluded to or mentioned to, is like you got some offices or practices that are like they're trying to fill multiple slots at the same time. Associate dentist, hygienist, dental assistant, administrative team. So if you're looking for, multiple positions to fill, kind of like Todd said to us, like, do you have the time to do all that? Or, well, you may make the time to do it, but do you have the time to do it well?
Do it, yeah.
One of the things I'm sort of passionate about is, I think in this world we have right now, everybody will use the word trust. I want to be a high trust advisor. I want to be a trusted source. I want to be a trusted doctor. I want to be trust is what people say. But when people say they want trust, people don't trust the media. They don't trust the government. They just don't trust each other. And I just ask everybody today, over the last 30 days, how many people were on your text or on your email or on your phone trying to sell you something? Sell you some product, some service of some type, not just dentistry, anything. It's probably for most of us, it could be in the hundreds over a 30-day period of time. Over 100 people have tried to sell you something on your phone, your email, or your text. And so if everybody's trying to sell you something, the important thing to me is that you want to be that person that's seen as educators, providing education, providing strategy, providing something other than selling that product. And so even if you don't do any branding, you say, well, I'm a single practice. How am I going to brand? I don't have the money to brand. But even when you're not branding, you're branding, because in this culture, everybody, including the patients and including the candidates that are going to work in your office, the first thing they do is Google you. They go to your social media. They look at other things that are around you. And so ultimately, they're making that decision of where they want to not only go as a patient, but people are also making a decision on where they want to work. And so what do we see when we find you? And then ultimately in our world, one of the things that you're working on is you want to be associated with brands. Like you mentioned in my bio, one of the things, for instance, that I try to help differentiate myself, because, Kevin, I don't believe in competition. I believe in differentiation. So how can I differentiate myself from every other financial advisor in the world? How can everyone on this call differentiate themselves from every other dentist in the world? And another way is to also be associated with good brands. That's why being a Forbes author or number 15 financial advisor in the country, or having the #1 book on Amazon. Our podcast, we may have a major international bank be our sponsor. So the idea is I want to be associated with brands that people have good feelings about. And I think in dental practices, you want to do the same thing. You want to do branding, and that doesn't mean you should go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing. But what are people looking at when they see you? Because they're going to have an impression of you. And if you don't put out the right impression, you're going to probably lose that war for talent. And you're also going to lose the war for patients.
Speaking of war for talent, we're kind of like on this little thread. I mean, Todd and I just had this come up on a call with a doctor earlier this week. And, Trent, you might have some, even some data on this, or, Mark, you might have some insight. But we talked to doctors, and this one in particular the other day, like, a small town, rural community. I mean, awesome practice, but really concerned that, or whether it's a limiting belief or whatever, is like nobody wants to come here and work. Nobody wants to come to the rural countryside. Nobody wants to work in a small town. Everybody wants to go work in a big city. Are you finding that to be true, Trent? Or, I mean, do you have?
Yeah, yes, no, for sure. So when we look at doctors and movement every year, we see about a 7 to 10% movement of in practice doctors per year. Of that 7 to 10%, roughly 42% pick 7 key states: New York, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, California, and Oregon. And then of that 42%, 25% want to be in a heavily populated city. So very rarely do we see physicians or dentists looking to go to smaller rural areas. Now, there is a market for smaller rural areas, and those are going to be dentists that have a lot more experience. It's about 12 plus years of experience. A lot of times they're looking at winding down, and so they want to retire. And so they're looking at smaller, rural, quiet, low place areas to do that.
So I know Kevin's a moderator here, but I'm going to throw a question at you, kind of, Trent, is like, do these associates that you guys are recruiting, the doctors, do they understand that the fee schedules are higher in the rural areas? They understand that they can potentially make a lot more money outside of the cities. I mean, is there a way we could educate them on that? I mean, because I know the fee schedules, I look at the same Delta in Pittsburgh and the same fee Delta an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh. I know that it's a lot higher. I see it every day when I'm coaching my clients. And plus two, like the one that, like, for example, that Kevin was just talking about, there's only 2 practices left in that whole entire little town, and they're both fee for service. I mean, it's a small town, but it's a great situation for an associate to walk in and potentially be a partner and build a long-term asset.
Well, overhead's typically lower, you know.
No, for sure. And that's an excellent point, Todd. It was either Kevin or Mark mentioned it earlier. You know, a large portion of what we do at Arthur Marshall is consult. We're not selling candidates on opportunities or selling opportunities on candidates. We're really consulting and matchmaking. And so to answer your question, no, 90% of dentists or physicians, doctors out there don't understand that if you go to a smaller market, the reimbursements are higher. But that's where we step in and where we can provide that educational piece and let them know that. So obviously, Arthur Marshall didn't start out in your large metro areas. We started out in the small rural locations. So being able to understand that dynamic and being able to have those types of conversations with dentists is so key. One of our top recruiters, his top places are small town Alabama, small town Arkansas, some of these more rural places, but he understands that market, understands those reimbursements. So when you're having a conversation with a dentist and they're telling us what they're looking for, then we can say, you know what, have you considered this? It's an hour outside of where you think you want to be. You can make so much more money. You can have much more of an impact on that community. And that's what gets the dentist to make that move.
It's almost the same question as, I coach, I see some of my clients are on here, and it's the first thing that we coach when the new patient coming in. Well, what matters most to you about your dental health? What matters most to you about your career, right? It's that same kind of probing discovery question.
Yeah. By the way, I have a little different slant on this because I think that these are terrible mindsets, meaning, what frosts me about a dentist is when they've already decided the treatment that I have because they think I can't afford it or I can't this, or they have a reason why they think it should be this. I think the job is to present all of the treatment and then let me as the patient decide what treatment I want. I think it's the same thing, that for as many opportunities and the very fact you have statistics that 42% of the people want to be in the cities and the like, there are so many other reasons that I think whether you think it's harder to recruit in rural areas or not, you're going to be right. And an opportunity, there's some great advantages on being in rural areas in terms of quality of life. When you're in New York, I'm in New York City and Palm Beach, Florida, is where I spent most of my life. Well, a dentist who's a top dentist in New York City, oftentimes can't even afford to be in those areas because you don't get the $20 million or the $50 million Wall Street bonus, or have the kind of liquidity events that those most folks do. When you're in those rural towns, You could be the top dog because there's no Fortune 500 companies in those rural areas. So that you've got the nicest house in town. You're the person that is a community leader. You're the person that's running the show. And so you could be a very big fish in a small pond. You have quality of life. You got good air to breathe. You got less traffic. You've got a better quality of life and a better pace. That's not for everybody. The city's not for everybody. There are so many advantages being in it. And I think that's your ability, the power to influence. But I know 3 or 4 of the docs on this phone, on this Zoom, and I'm saying the biggest competitive advantage is not where your office is. It's the opportunity to come and learn at the foot of the master and be able to spend time mentoring that young doctor to bring them up to the kind of standard of care and the business acumen that they're going to have, so they could be more successful working with you in a few years than they could be in any other practice in the country, even if it's not in their ideal geographical location. And ultimately, also, it's your job to let them understand what the opportunities are there, because people will always kind of tend to go to the place that they know. And so part of it is making sure that you're getting the spouse on board, that you're making sure that if they've got a family, it's a family decision, that this will be not only a great opportunity for a career for the doctor, but for their spouse and for their kids as well, and that everybody will be lifted up. Everybody will be better off if we make that decision to come work for you. Ultimately, you're not selling the rural area. You're selling this experience to work with you. And so I hate limiting mindsets.
But that being said, and I think we'll start with you on this one, Todd. These mentoring, opportunities, rural. I mean, Trent said that, a lot of the people that want to go to the rural areas are more experienced doctors. What are the pros and cons of hiring either a recent dental school graduate or an experienced dentist as an associate?
Well, I mean, thinking back into the days when I first owned a restaurant, and we were hiring a restaurant bar. I was in Morgantown, West Virginia. When I brought it at 21 years old, I was a bartender, and I always looked and said, I want to hire a bartender. This was my philosophy back then. I want to hire a bartender that had no experience. I wanted to be able to train them and make the drinks how I wanted to make them, so they're not bringing in the bad habits. So I think that if you are a really good teacher, you're a really good mentor, you're good, then yeah, it can be very beneficial for you to bring in a newer grad and train them up and mentor them. But I think it really determines where you're at in your career, though, too. But with that being said, though, too, I know that there's some people that have that mindset where, hey, I got to take whatever I can get right now, because like Mark was saying, the pool is, there's so many people right now. We got to make offers to everybody. I've been seeing that now. I've been seeing a lot of our offices around Pittsburgh just offering everybody, just to try to hopefully one will accept their offer.
I would add one more thing is you could make the argument, and I've gone back and forth. I'm with you, Todd. I've had more success with people that knew nothing, so they only knew it the way we wanted them to do it. But I've also started to have some success in other things. And I think it's come down to the 3 questions you would ask people, and I would say to them, it's in our organization, you can't be a yes to 2 of the 3. You can't even be a yes to all 3. You have to be a hell yeah to all 3. And it's GWC. When I talk to somebody, whether they're experienced or not, the G is, do they get what we're doing? The W is, do they want to be in our office? Not because they don't have a better offer or it's 5 minutes from the house. Do they really want to be in our office? And the C is, with proper training, do they have the capability to do the job? So do they get it? Want to have capability as a hell yeah. Even if they're super strong on 2, if it's not all 3, they won't be successful. And then the third, and then the next part is, we then have created our core values. I happen to have 7 core values in our company. You could have 3, you could have 5, you could have 6. We have 7. And so when I'm interviewing somebody, I'll sit down and I'll say to them, hey, Todd, one of our core values is we want to create not only an experience, but we want to create a wow experience for every client. If you don't wake up jazzed every day about creating a wow experience, you're going to be miserable. And the people outside my office are going to hate your guts because they wake every day trying to create that wow experience. And you can tell people that everyone's trying to put their best foot forward in an interview, but you can tell who gets it and says, I'm all in, or you can get those people who are faking it. And I take them through each of the core values, and very quickly, if they get it, want to have capability, and they have our core values, that's an unstoppable team. And that makes it very easy. And then we take it one step further. Once a year, I not they. It's not a self-assessment. It's a CEO assessment. I put every one of my people on our core values, our 7 core values, and I rate them plus, minus, or minus. And if you have 1 minus or more than 2 plus minuses, exit visas are imminent. It doesn't mean I'm firing you on the spot. It just means, although I like to think of my business as a family, and I think many of you do, I also think of it like a ball club, and I'm a general manager and I need to upgrade my talent. Because the one thing I think we know is I'd rather play shorthanded with a team of people that get it, want to have capability, and have my core values, than to just throw bodies and money at a problem with people that don't get it. And they literally become cancers and eat away at our culture and values. So and by the way, the other thing is the other limiting mindset I would say to people that it took me a while to overcome, probably it was crippling in my first maybe 15 years in business, is I thought some people were essential to my business. And I will say this to you, that nobody is irreplaceable, and that includes me. And so, once you start thinking you're irreplaceable, that you should be the first one to go.
Wow, it's powerful.
So here's a follow-up question, and I think we'll have you start this one, Trent. Following on what Mark just said, are there any specific interview questions or scenarios that can help you assess a candidate's clinical skills, their patient management abilities? How do you get to that GWC?
Yes, no, and I wrote that down too, Mark.
I did too.
That's great. That's great. So, that's an excellent question, Kevin. And I just had a conversation with a potential client, and they asked the same thing. And so what we do and what we've been trained to do is go through those behavioral interview questions. So questions that gauge how you think and act in various situations. Many of those questions are going to focus around scenarios, requiring the candidate to outline what they would do in a specific circumstance. And so being able to gauge that really gives you light on how they react, as opposed to just answering questions about their skill set and what they can do, what they learned in training and what they've done, because everybody's going to answer those questions like you want to hear. And then you hire them and they can do it, but then they don't have that extra piece. So we really rely on the behavioral interview techniques.
You have any follow-up on that, Todd or Mark? Or
Yeah, I think you got to begin, with the behavioral, with values. As I was saying, I think even all your employees now, not necessarily the associates, is how you should start. But then you got to break it down into, kind of, every time we look at a different associates, you break it down values, but then you break it down into clinical skill-based questions. What clinical skill-based questions are the most important to you? Then you got to break it down into patient management questions. How are we going to be able to make sure that they're building the rapport? How are they going to make sure that they're managing their patients? Because this is the business. And then, what about case presentation questions and treatment planning questions? And then, the final thing is, how are they going to work with the team? Are they going to be a right fit? Like Mark was talking about, how everybody on the team should be your biggest recruiters. Everybody on the team should be promoting them in there. So how are you going to, specific questions should be revolve around how they're going to be interacting with the team.
GWC.
I'm going to throw a little wrench in here just to make the discussion maybe a little bit interesting. So if you don't have core values and you don't have a vision, what's your chances of successfully recruiting, hiring and retaining an associate, or maybe even any staff member for that matter?
What's the chance of having a very high performance car with no steering wheel or no engine?
I think these are the people that are right now that are out there on Indeed and stuff throwing, and I know this may not seem like a lot for New York and places, but $55, $60 an hour, $50 an hour for hygienists, when that's not the market. I mean, because they have no culture. They're trying just to throw dollars out there and hoping that they can get somebody coming in.
And then a signing bonus to boot. Yeah. So we were having a little bit discussion before the meeting started about, NDAs and non-competes. So, I mean, there's some like legal considerations, but I mean, one question we had kind of preloaded here is like, what are some effective ways to conduct reference checks or background screenings for potential associate dentists? I think you're probably the best one to maybe kick that one off, Trent.
Yeah. So what
part of your process?
So it is, and we will be involved as much as the client wants us to do. But right off the bat, we'll ask the candidate for references. Sometimes we will do blind references, so we'll take a look at the CV and reach out to past employers. And it's just, we ask the clinical questions. How were they in this type of situation? Because 9 times out of 10, when you ask for references from a candidate, you're not going to get a bad reference. So, doing the blind references works, and we will do that, or we will suggest that the client do the blind references as well.
I also find that there's a lot of questions you can ask or you shouldn't ask in an interview. Some are illegal and just some are just not appropriate. But so sort of the way I try to elicit information is I try to backdoor it by sharing things about my life with them,
Mm-hmm.
and giving them the open to then be open with them, where it's not so canned or prepackaged. I'll say things, like I'll let them know that I have 5 kids, and because you can't ask somebody how many kids you have or how many kids you want to have, or you can't have, you can't ask any one of a million questions to people. But when I start talking to them about myself, it then gives them the opportunity to then open up about them. And that's when I find a lot of the information that's there. You'll find in those interviews that'll be less guarded or less prescripted, and you'll really get an insight to how they really think going forward. And, but again, I think if they don't have your core values, not only it becomes pretty easy because most of the time they self-select out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
having those.
Anyway. Yes, no, that's very correct. Having those types of conversations, opening them up, asking them about, what they enjoy doing when they're not practicing. It lowers their guard, it gets them talking. And yes, some things will come up that are red flags. Or if you just look at the CV and you see that there's a lot of jumping around, you just ask them about it. But having those open conversations, engaging in dialogue and conversation, and not just asking questions and waiting for answers, and engaging in those types of conversations, you'd be surprised what you find and uncover.
I also think as a leader in your organizations, when you lead by example and really put people first, you put family first for them. You have long-term employees. Everybody has a sick kid, or they've got a problem with with something or the other, or any one of the things that go wrong in their life, and you stick by them. If you got the right people there, and you have not a year or a month or a week or something, but a lifetime of leading as a servant leader and of giving and letting people know that you support them as people first. It's amazing what they'll do for you when you create that ecosystem. They'll run through walls for you. I think the two things, people think it's about money. It's not about money. It's about, it's really about, have you created that an ecosystem that they want to be part of, and you give them an opportunity to grow and develop and continue to learn. So if you help them learn and you help them create a place that feels like home, they'll never leave. And they'll be engaged in the process because it'll be a community that they want to be part of and they want to help nurture.
I think it's one of the great things that we work with you guys with, Mark, is just setting up either the deferred comps and partnership agreements. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. You create that where they're asking for that. Whether it's not just necessarily the associate doctors, the doctors that are on this call are going to be listening to the recording, that you have key employees. We've set up in the last 3 or 4 weeks, because we've set up several deferred comp plans for COOs or director of operation type positions, just because it's so important too. But they're asking for that instead of you having to throw that out at them. And that's what you create as a really good leader.
I go back to saying that the doctor is the talent, the opportunity to mentor with you. Is I think you want to sell them the dream. You want to sell them the vision. You don't want to sell them on that they can have a seat at the table. You want to help them build their own table.
Mm-hmm.
We got
That's
several more topics, I think.
You want something powerful and transformational in their life to be there.
Got several more topics here I think we really want to get to. So I think we're going to go start maybe like a little bit of a speed round here. And then we can circle back and elaborate on things if we need to. So, and you just kind of touched on this a little bit, but how can I assess a candidate's potential for long-term commitment to my dental practice, and what can I do to create stickiness? It's kind of like what you were alluding to, Todd, with, Mark or Trent. I mean, what kind of, or I guess, when does the conversation come up about any kind of deferred compensation or, profit sharing plan or anything that's going to create that stickiness or, that both way long-term commitment?
I think those are tools, meaning, having, the BAM plan that Fortune is so great at, or having deferred compensation agreements and other things like that. But it's not about just more money. That I don't think is what people are, what people are looking. I mean, I think those are more tools. I think it's more what you want to do as the CEO is you want to be able to really get to know your people. I don't mean that you know who they're dating or, the problems they're having at home or all those things, not to, be too familiar with people. But I think the idea is that I think that there are four important things. I think there is health. Remember, a person that has their health has thousands of different dreams and visions. Someone who's unhealthy has only one dream, and that's to be healthy. So you have to have health first. You have to have wealth. You also want to have purpose in your life. And one of the things that we can do as business owners is to give them purpose. And I think they also need to have love. And I'm not talking about love in a sexual sense, and that's great. But I think love of community, love of friendship, love of sister and brotherhood, that sort of stuff. So if you can have health and wealth and love and purpose, and you can create that in your people's lives, that's a place where you can help foster or facilitate it. I think that is a good is another way to make sure that people want to stay with you for the long term.
Okay, so I got this. This one's for you, Trent. This is, how can I negotiate a fair and competitive compensation package for an associate dentist? Since we are in, kind of almost like a, little bit of a war or battle out there for candidates, what kind of package do you put together?
Yeah, so, one of the first things and one of the first few conversations is you can't look at your neighbor and see what they're offering. When we go to recruit and when you're recruiting because of the war on talent, you may go get somebody that's across the country. These people are competing against everybody in the nation. They're not just focused on Pittsburgh or, California. So when I look at compensation, I got to look at a national number. What nationwide, what are we looking at as an average? Now we can look at regionally, but really we want to be competitive on a national basis.
So what are you seeing on a range? Is it like 25 to 35% of collections, or 25, 30% of adjusted production, adjusted collections? I mean, what?
So what we're seeing for general dentistry when it comes to production. So general dentistry, we're looking at, you'll start out with a daily guarantee, and that's anywhere between $750 on the low end per day up to about $1,000 to $1,200 a day for a certain period of time, 3 to 6 months. Or you couple that with production. For general dentistry, anywhere between 30 to about 36 to 37% of net collections, net production is what we see as a competitive offer. So it would be the daily guarantee or production net collections, whatever's higher.
And what are you seeing on how the lab fees handled in most of those arrangements? 50-50?
Yeah, 50-50. I do have some aggressive clients that will pay all lab fees, but most of it is 50-50, and that would be a competitive offer.
I'm gonna give this one to you, Todd, because we were just talking about it not too long ago. Are there any specific performance metric or benchmarks I should establish before I hire an associate? And then what is the best strategies to track performance going forward?
Well, I think you obviously you got to look at the space you have. Is there room for an associate? But specific benchmarks, I think it really looks on how far are you booked out and how much do you want to stay clinical? Are you just using your, like, I have just give an example. I have an office or a client that has 4 offices. He just wants to do all in X's now. He has an associate each one of the 4 offices and kind of uses those as a funnel to, he works 2 days a week and just does his bigger procedures. So I think that the benchmark really is, it's hard to really say, but it really kind of comes down to what you want to do. If you're wanting to be less clinical, or if you've got to figure out too, how much, like Mark was saying earlier, you got to pay yourself 4 ways. Anytime we're looking at, and we're as a fortune coach, we're always looking at the income expense monitor, and we'll look at what the actual expenses are, and we make sure that they're paying themselves as a CEO. They're paying themselves based on collections, because how are you going to be able to sell that practice, or how are you going to be able to know if you can afford somebody or replace somebody if you're just doing your ownership distributions or just pulling out of the business whenever you want? So you've got to set that up properly. I always recommend, hey, take a 3 to 4% CEO salary and take a 3% clinical advisor salary, because that's what you're going to need as you grow. And then pay yourself on 30% collections. Now let's see what you're really making. And now it'll help us decide where you can move forward. I'm sure Mark has a little bit more on that, because that's right up his wheelhouse there.
I mean, in a poorly run practice, the owner doctor is better off working for somebody else, because if they're not taking home 30 or 35% of their collectible production, or some number that you guys have been batting around over the last couple of minutes, why would you take all the risk, have all the headaches, to take home the same as if you could work 3.5 days a week down the street for somebody else and have no worries when you go home at night? Unless that asset value is going to go. And it's hard. And the other thing too is that ultimately, as a wealth manager, there's dozens and dozens of asset classes, but for our purposes tonight, there's really only 2. And we call them paychecks, or either free capital or play checks. So what I want our clients to set up a series of assets that will give us either a guaranteed or a highly reliable stream of income to replace their income as doctors. And we call those paychecks. And then I wanted to have another series of assets where we can spend it, we can save it, we can give it away. But the important thing is we'll not be responsible for producing income for our family. So if you have both paychecks and play checks, you have financial freedom. But if you don't have any EBITDA in your business above the line, there's still one more level. And if you don't have that EBITDA, we find a lot of our doctors are continuing to own their practice well beyond the time that they're practicing dentistry on a part-time basis, or even at all. Because if you have a $2 million practice, Todd, and it's throwing off 25% EBITDA, you can have some other associate come in and be the doctor, and you still have a $500,000 a year salary coming in. Absolutely. From what you've created, but from the lifetime of work. And if you've got $500,000 coming in passively after you paid all the doctors and you paid all the expenses, that's like having $10 million in the bank earning 5%. What's a $2 million practice going to get sold for? Probably somewhere, depending on its EBITDA, between, maybe $1 million, 1 or 2, to maybe, some DSO might, if it's very profitable, might pay a couple of million plus, but they're not paying you 10 million. And so the idea, and it's not tax advantage, because once you sell it, you get rid of all the deductions. So if you can continue to run your life, legitimately through your corporation and take the expenses, you're in a much better tax situation than if you just, are a private citizen retired. So if you have both paychecks and playchecks, and then you have earned income beyond normal retirement age, that's one of the ways you can create multi-generational wealth.
I think this is probably this would probably be Trent and Todd, and I'm sure Mark has some insight on it too, but how can I provide effective onboarding and orientation for a new associate dentist?
Well, I think, Mark hit it right earlier, just talking about the mentorship. I think that if you're not providing the right mentorship and support, you got to be willing to do that more than anything. You patient care and communication. But really, I think it all starts with your onboarding when you hire this new associate. We're training all of our clients. Hey, you've got to be set aside time for mentoring time. Set aside in the schedule, block this associate's new schedule. Don't just throw them in there. When you're doing new procedures, block the schedule for them when you're doing your first crown. When you're doing some of these procedures, we actually love to see for the first couple of weeks that schedule, over half their schedule should be blocked out where they're observing and they're being the mentee that they should be. I think that's a great thing that I'd like to coach my doctors on.
Also, when you're the great artist, Todd, it's you get so focused on the work and your schedule's busy and you're running from one room to the next and trying to get everything done and then run the business in the middle. But I think the most effective CEOs find every opportunity possible to check in with their people. Again, to give them that sense of community, and they do it intentionally, not sort of, they do it intentionally like it's a regular part of their practice, because it does a few things. Remember, I said, let's not solve one problem, let's solve 3 or 4.
Right.
But one of the things it does is it really creates a sense of community with people, makes them feel great about being there and their sense of purpose in the practice. But for me, the best part of that is that's the time when I really understand what's going on in my company, because as the CEO, you can't be in touch with everything that's going on, and you learn a lot about what's going on in your company. And in addition, you see it through the fourth thing you get from it is you get to see it through another prism, meaning I've been looking at the same set of circumstances with already looking eyes, already listening ears for 37 years. Those people, especially those younger people, I learn, as much as I mentor them, for everything I teach them, I probably learn 2 things, because I'm learning things from their perspective and their eyes, which allows me to get better. And so, by doing that and putting that time aside, you don't solve one problem, you solve 3 or 4.
Well,
So like right on the tail of that then is like, I mean, there are some offices that are concerned about hiring an associate and bringing a, associate in because they have a great culture, they got a good team, they have that family environment, and they basically don't want to tip the canoe, so to speak. So, what strategies can be implemented to ensure smooth integration of an associate dentist, not only into the dental team socially, but also into the practice workflow?
I think really quick on that is one of the things too we're having our doctors look more and more into is in that initial interview process of figuring out what CE they want and giving them a CE allowance, or however you want to put it in that contract. So they're making sure that they're getting the proper CE, they're staying on technology, and maybe you're covering the first $8,000 to $10,000 of CE for the year. But, especially if it's a new grad, I'd love to see them have 150, 200 hours of CE a year. That would be great. It's going to cut back on some of the time that you're being the mentorship too, but it's so important for them to build on that.
So would you say, Trent, when you onboard a new candidate, is there kind of like a courtship period, like both, before the hiring and then after?
Oh, for sure. And that's a key part of bringing on a new associate is, one, you've got to make them feel welcome. Bring them in, bring them in with that love that Mark was talking about. Make sure you have time set aside for them to follow you and shadow you. If you have assigned that task to somebody else, make sure that they have the time to do that. We're dealing with a situation right now. It's a hygienist. They hired this hygienist. The person that's supposed to train them is super busy, so she'll just throw something on the hygienist lap and then walk away. Now, this young lady has 30 years of experience, so she's not completely green, but she's feeling like she is not part of the team. She feels lost because she doesn't have any guidance, any direction. And she had already threatened it that she was going to leave, that wasn't the right fit. So being able to spend time with that new associate, hygienist, dental assistant, spending that time up front and giving them the attention. You got to roll out the red carpet for these candidates because there's so many opportunities out there. As soon as they feel like they're not part of the team, or they don't feel like they have all the tools, they'll leave. But no, I'd agree with you, Todd, as well. Is yes, give these candidates, give these dentists the opportunity to grow, learn, and expand, because all it's going to do is continue to add value to your practice. Like Mark said or at the very beginning, you're not growing your business, you're growing your people.
Absolutely.
And so Mark was talking earlier about like limiting mindsets, or like what we refer to in Fortune as like limiting beliefs. One that I've, encountered like fairly frequently is that there seems to be this concept that the DSOs and the large group practices, whether they're private equity backed or not, that they have some kind of recruiting and hiring advantage. I'd love to hear comments on, the truth to that, or whether it is a limiting belief, or,
I mean, there again, the other thing too is like DSO to me is like the word hedge fund. We represent a lot of hedge funds. Hedge fund can mean, it started out by meaning you were hedging risk. Now a hedge fund could be somebody who bets on the price of cheese doodles on Tuesdays. So it has nothing to do with hedging risk. So a DSO is, there's, I mean, DSO is a wide range of stuff. But if you're talking about, private equity backed money with deep pockets, they can afford to bring doctors on and pay them a salary that's probably greater than most people in the private sector are going to want to pay. But when you give somebody a salary, what they're really doing is it's a bribe to help them give up their dream. And so if you're a worker bee and you want to be an employee, maybe being a DSO and working there is the right thing for you. Maybe if you need to go and master your craft, you want to work at the DSO for 3 to 5 years and really hone your craft and then go into private practice, that's great. But I think for people that are entrepreneurial people, that people are true entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs, and want to create massive amounts of multi-generational wealth, they view that's just a bribe to give up their dreams, and that they'll never create multi-generational wealth working for somebody. They'll have a nice, comfortable salary and a comfortable life, but will never create any wealth. They'll always be on the hamster wheel.
Wow, that's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard, Mark. I never looked at it like that. Wow.
No, 100%. I mean, and that's what we see on the recruiting side is, these DSOs that have the deep pockets, they'll throw this money at candidates, get them in, and 2-3 years into it, we get the call. This is not a good decision for me. I have been capped. I can't create that generational wealth, because you are hired at that point. You either have a salary or they've lured you in with a large sign-on bonus. And so, you're definitely, you're hired, you're an employee. You're not creating generational wealth, and that's what we see.
So are you finding that a challenge in recruiting, Trent, or is it actually like an opportunity? It's like a great source of candidates.
So it's an opportunity for us to educate.
Okay.
And so I can't tell you that going to a DSO is the wrong choice. If this is what you're looking for, then it may be the right choice. Right. If you're looking to create something, if you're looking to build, create wealth, create that generational wealth and be the CEO, then this is the option. So it's an opportunity for us to really educate, especially the newer grads that are coming out.
I don't believe in problems. I mean, I'm not Pollyannish where you go, we have to ignore problems and look through rose-colored glasses. You got to deal with those issues. But remember, every problem is an opportunity. That's how entrepreneurs think. Every problem is an opportunity to do better. I mean, wasn't COVID the greatest example of it? To me, COVID was a great example because really forward-thinking companies use COVID to turbocharge and propel their businesses. And all the mediocre businesses use COVID as an excuse of why everything didn't go well for them. And I think it's the same thing there. It's a mindset of how you look at things. There's no finish lines, there's only milestones. There's no problems, there's opportunities. And it's how you look at things. Even one of the things that I'm always, I would say, Trent, I would say that you sell, the idea is that, your product, your firm provides a product that you sell the recruiting service, or we sell financial services products, or dentist sells, dental services. But I think part of it's mindset. And so, one of the things that I try to teach our doctors or teach our entrepreneurs is, regardless of the situation you're in, even if you're selling a product or service like the guys on this panel are doing and everybody in the audience is doing,
Absolutely.
it's a mindset. I'm never the seller, I'm always the buyer. No matter what circumstance I'm in, I'm never the seller, I'm always the buyer. I'm giving them, in your case, Todd, I'm giving them the opportunity to have the Todd King experience. And I think if they decided not to have the Todd King or the Trent experience or the Arthur Marshall experience, I feel sorry for those poor, can I say the word bastards? I feel sorry for those poor bastards who didn't get the Todd King experience.
Well, then quick enough with the bleep there, Mark, but okay. It's on tape now.
It's we can always edit it out, but I think that ultimately it's how you look at those things. Nothing has any meaning other than the meaning we said to it. And so part of about being an entrepreneur is that you have to have a long memory and a short memory. There's a long memory in that you don't want to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You want to have institutional learning, but short learning, that's part of the journey and part of the process. Remember, every at least for me, my greatest learning always came through my failures. In fact, I don't even think of them as failures. I didn't learn as much from the successes as I learned from the failures. But at this point in my life, I look at my failures as just another form of market research. It just gave me the opportunity to, like I used to talk to my, some people that were from some scarcity that were in my family. And they could tell you early in my career, everything I spent $10,000 on that failed, in terms of a marketing strategy or something that we invested in the business didn't fail. And they would probably have been correct. But at the same time, if we didn't do those 2 or 3 or 4 things that failed, we would have done 2 or 3 or 4 other things that helped make us millions, in a few cases, tens of millions of dollars, if we hadn't done the things that failed too. We were willing to go out there and take the risk and go out there and invest in ourselves and be in a place where we're in creation and fascination mode all the time. And that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. Remember, the world is not served by playing small. So let's go play big. Let's make the world a better place to be.
Absolutely.
And like Ted Lasso would say, be a goldfish.
So, Trent, let's say somebody decides, you know what, I'm looking for an associate, but I'm really not quite ready to call up Arthur Marshall and Trent and do this whole process. Are there any specific resources or platforms that you would steer them for that are available to help streamline the hiring process if you were to try and do it on your own?
Yeah, I think the first thing they would need to know their GWC, know what they're looking for, make sure that, they want to be there, and then make sure that they're capable of doing a job. Obviously so we back up. There's two candidate pools, an active candidate pool and a passive candidate. The only way to get to the active candidate pool is to be on the job force. And just swim with those fish and those sharks, and make sure that you have a good competitive offer. When you do interview somebody, you have to roll out the red carpet because your neighbor will. These DSOs are going to do that. Be true to yourself. Make sure that candidate can produce. It's not all about that daily guarantee. It's about the potential. You got to make sure that candidate feels like they have a home, somewhere that they can grow and something that can be a piece of. When it comes to accessing that passive market, that's tough doing it on your own. Unless you can dedicate 8 or 9 hours a day, ground roots, picking up the phone, calling potential candidates. You have to have a database to access. It's tough nowadays to do it on your own because of the competition that's out there.
Can you go a little bit more into
there's only 2 things. There's expenses and there's investments. Every
Right.
expense should always be on the chopping block. If you're an investment, as long as you can get a 4 or 5 to 1 return on your money or more, you ought to make that investment. I view Arthur Marshall as an investment. I view Fortune as an investment. Fortune was my secret weapon 25 years ago, where I could go to a doctor and bring Fortune in. And for most practices, they, within 6 months or a year, they'd have 30 to 50, 60% or more to the bottom line than they had before eating Fortune. And as a financial advisor, that gave me the opportunity to then have the cash flow in place to do the things we wanted to do to help them create wealth. So I don't know, when you have these amazing resources that are out there, I don't know why anybody wouldn't invest in it, because they're going to get at least a 4 or 5 to 1 return on their money. I think anybody who thinks that that's not the case, they should recommend to their patients that they do their own root canals at home. We can look at a YouTube video and just do your own root canal. I mean, it is outright such a scarcity model in terms of how people think, because it's either an investment or an expense. And if it's an expense, I get it. But if it's an investment, why should you not have an unlimited appetite for investment, as long as you can get a 4 to 5 return on your money or more?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark, for that, because it is, and I explain that all the time. It is an investment. And what I guess people fail to realize is, yes, when you invest in your business, when you invest in a dentist, that ROI is what Mark just mentioned. This person is going to be able to produce. And so I usually tell them, the investment in your practice is about 5 to 7% of first year's annual production. Now, that dentist is not going to just produce that first year. Most likely, they're going to continue to increase their ability to produce. As the business grows, their production is going to grow. So it is an investment in your business.
Hey, this is a question that came in for the audience. So say you're looking to, expand or, complement your existing clinical deliverables, or you want to increase your offering of services, is it better to hire a specialist to come in and do those services, or would you look for an associate and then try and train them on your own?
Todd, that's probably a question for you.
So we see it both ways. I mean, I have offices that they do really, really well. They bring in a specialist in. You may pay 50% of the collections when they come in, and they come in once or twice a month. But then it really depends on the clinical skills and how much that person wants to grow. I have some associates that, hey, they don't ever want to do certain procedures. They never want to do all in X's. But then too, I've seen this pretty recently, where this is a CEO minded doctor, pushed an associate too far into doing procedures that they said they want to do it, but then they were hesitant, pushing them too far into doing all in X's or whatever that procedure is. So you got to be careful about that as well, is not pushing your general dentist too far out of their comfort zone, or they're going to leave or not feel comfortable or feel like you're pushing them into that.
I think that just that question might also be, and I think this is for you, Trent, like right now, is it easier to hire a specialist in that situation or an associate general dentist? I mean, what's the recruiting market look like for a specialist?
Yeah,
endodontist, orthodontist.
Oddly enough, going to market for a specialist has been easier than the general dentist. And I'd go back and ask that practice owner, if it's an endodontist that they're considering bringing on, how much endo work are they referring out? And if they're referring out enough that makes sense to bring one in, you also have to ask the question, if you don't quite have enough endo work, is that endo open to doing some general dentistry to kind of to supplement as they grow the endo practice? So we've looked at that several times. And you have some dynamics there. Do you want an endo coming in doing general dentistry taken away from the other dentists? So there's got to be a good mix and good dynamic there.
And I think that's where it goes back into, if you have a fortune coach or you're working with us, we know this isn't just a question you kind of sprung it out there, but it's not just hey, there's a yes, hey, bring an associate in or bring a general practice in. We're seeing the procedure mix. We're watching what's happening and what's being referred out every single month for our clients. We're seeing those type of things. So it's something that we see over time. It's not, hey, and there's not just always something, a peg just to plug into that hole every single time.
So last question, and then we can circle back on anything that anybody wants to, or open up to Q&A. I think we have about 15 minutes left. So I think we can look at this on two different levels, but how much is AI going to change the landscape of dentistry? I think also, like from your perspective, Trent, how is AI going to change, recruiting, and matching? And then more specifically with, how is it going to impact being like the CEO in your practice?
So I think AI, as it stands now, can have a positive impact on recruiting. Just utilizing it to help construct job postings, help construct emails. You can't replace sitting down with a practice owner, sitting down with a candidate, and really asking them what they're looking for to create in their life. You can't replace that human interaction. Can you enhance it by using AI? Yes, but you can't replace human interaction. So really sitting down and coming out to a practice owner to understand their day-to-day dynamic, understand what they're trying to create in their practice. AI can't do that.
So what do you think, Mark, with like being the CEO of your practice, when you have AI that can generate, job descriptions?
I mean, there's
you
clearly AI is going to eliminate a lot of jobs over the next couple of decades for sure. But that's why in our firm we try to focus not on knowledge, because you can get knowledge from Google or Siri. You want to focus on wisdom, and I think that wisdom is not going to be easily replaced. I think that there's a limitation on how much artificial insurance can have in terms of wisdom, and right now I don't see any robots that are doing dentistry right now. So I think dentistry is it could be in 50 years they could be dentist could be
there
absolutely
is the robotic assisted implant placement.
Yeah, I mean, but I think ultimately that for entrepreneurial people or business owners, I think I think that it will change and things will come. But I'm with Trent. There'll be some challenges, but there'll also be some opportunities as well. And I don't think we should be terrified about it, because there's both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. There's AI and then there's generative AI, right? So, AI has been around for quite a long time. Generative AI is what's newer, the chat GBTs and stuff that people are, it's getting all the publicity, but there's no doubt that AI is going to transform dentistry. But it's not meant to replace the doctor. What AI is going to happen and what's going to grow is it's going to be the doctor's co-pilot. It's going to be the dentist's co-pilot along. Like, for example, we were at our Fortune corporate meeting in San Diego, and there was a new company that we have an alliance partner with called Pearl.ai. And it was pretty amazing, some of the stuff that Pearl is doing right now. They can go back in, and it's affecting everything we look at, every merger we're looking at now. Pearl.ai can go back in and look at the last 18 months of x-rays and images and show you where stuff wasn't diagnosed. Think about how powerful that is alone for the dental CEO. So now if I'm making one of my clients, and some of those ones are on here, making an offer now, we'll bring in Pearl to look at those things and see all the missed opportunities when we're going in to buy that practice. Never been able to do that before. And AI has been, a lot of people don't realize this, AI is like hair transplants. AI has been doing those for quite a long time. It's a lot easier to go in and getting the hair follicles. That's been happening for a while. So AI has been around, but some of this new technology and some of the new ways to use it, you're going to have to embrace it. I think Mark just said that you are absolutely going to have to embrace AI, and you're going to have to stay informed. But also too, being a dental CEO, I've been really talking to my doctors that have multiple associates on this. To keep up your standard of care, having AI is going to help keep your standard of care at the highest level. What does that mean? Because that way you're going to be able to look at the x-rays, be able to look at what your associates are diagnosing, and being able to see. You could always look at x-rays, but it's just going to help that process.
It's interesting to me. It's like it's AI to me. It's also technology, meaning I think people that are not embracing technology are not going to be just left behind. They're going to be excluded from life in general. You can't. There's some arenas, if you want to go to a game or to a concert, you can't get in unless the unless the ticket's on your smartphone. There are no tickets.
Yep.
There is, you can go, people are not going to go and do the old kind of fashioned dentistry. They're going to want technology. They're going to want the very best technology in the practices, and that includes AI. So I just think that's where the investments are going to be made. And by the way, AI also may help, and technology. There's no question, though, on the other side, there'll be a lot of first mid-level workers. There'll be a lot of white-collar workers that are doing functions that AI will do for your organization. And people like truck drivers and other things like that. I mean, there's going to be less need for folks like that, with smart cars and other things like that. But I think that part of it is you can either be terrified with it and go in the fetal position and crawl under a rug, crawl under your covers and go, oh my God, it's coming to an end. Or you can look at it as an opportunity, as we talked about, to potentially differentiate you from everybody else that's in your space.
AI doesn't have culture. AI doesn't have values. AI doesn't really have GWC, right?
No. It'll be a tool, though.
There are no finish lines, only milestones.
Absolutely.
This was great. The guys, all I can tell you is that I appreciate you having me out tonight, and
Appreciate you guys.
I got to tell you that Todd, I am a huge fan. I cannot think of there's a couple of good ones, but there's no finer executive coach in the country than you, and appreciate your leadership that you have across the industry. And Trent, the same thing. You and Arthur Marshall are first rate, and Kevin, I don't know. Maybe you should try to get Oprah Winfrey's job, or you should be a talk show host or something. I think you did a great job tonight, and I hope that the people who were here hopefully got something from it. I know we all tried to help them, and just